And last but not least, the order of operation.
This one's big.
Yes. And how you're going about actually executing.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that.
When you start having to rework something that you've already done, you're compounding costs, you're compounding frustrations, you're compounding time.
Welcome back to Return on Design. I am your host, Rachel, and I am joined today with my co-host and amazing husband,
Justin Niederhofer.
Today, we're going to be sharing with you the 5 things that you need to focus on when it comes to renovation execution. These things are what can make or break the success of your project.
Yeah, because the success of your project, that's not won at the tile store or at the home goods store. It's won by making sure you allocate your decision-making properly in the right locations. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
First one let's highlight is function. What is the layout and the form of the space? And when you identify function, it's going to help you actually establish a design plan of what you want to do when it comes to the renovation.
Yeah, things like, are we, removing or adding any walls? Are we widening openings? What is the kitchen layout going to look like? Things like that. And do we have the proper space?
Yes. So form, function, traffic flow, how a space is actually lived in and experienced really matters. That is, a huge thing that can easily be overlooked if we're only obsessing about finish selections and the final aesthetic and we're glossing over the true livability aspect. You're setting yourself up.
Yeah, you wind up putting a Band-Aid over a problem, as we've talked about before, not addressing what the root of the problem is and why you want to maybe update some things if you're a homeowner, or how somebody's going to actually live in the space if you're an investor.
That's how, people end up calling us 2 years after they did a major renovation, because they went ahead and executed plans without any real strategy behind their design.
Exactly.
So function of the space. Another important piece that you need to evaluate is
scope of work.
Scope of work.
Your definition of, are we refreshing, or are we completely remodeling? Are we going to sell it, or are we going to hold this?
Yes. So dialing in on the scope all the way to a T. So once you've established, your plan, well, now we actually need to scope that out so that it's clearly communicated to everybody. Itemizing the scope, making sure you've really identified what changes will be made, what won't, and the priority of each change. Mm-hmm. Without a scope, you're putting yourself in a risk-prone position to overspend really easily because you haven't fully identified initially what the work is. And now it's like, oh yeah, well, go ahead and just add that too. Or, you know what, I didn't think about this. Can you go ahead and just look at this too? And it just starts to creep. Your scope work, as it creeps, that turns into budget
inflations, sometimes added stress. If it was one more thing, and then, oh wait, budget's going even higher than I thought,
Yeah. And it also leaves you susceptible to make decisions impulsively without ever identifying what is the cause and effect. And that sounds so simple, well, yeah, that's obvious. But it happens all the time. We had a client who did a renovation and they, gutted the whole bathroom. They started executing the new design. And then there was this huge void in the corner and they didn't know what to do with it. So on the fly, they ended up making a very functional closet.
It was unattractive and it was not really unusable.
Yeah. And that happens all the time. Because when you're constantly changing your scope on the fly, we didn't think about this corner in here. What do you want this corner to be? And they're like, I don't know. What do you think it should be? Oh, let's just turn it into a closet.
And you're planning so that you can execute. Your decisions need to be proactive rather than reactive.
Yes.
There's always a little bit of reactive decision making, because when you find something that was truly unexpected, okay, now how do we pivot? But if you've planned it properly, you should have a pretty good idea of where you're going to turn and how you can make the adjustment.
Let's move in. So we've already talked about function, flow. You've got to make sure you're evaluating that. We've talked about really defining the scope of work, making sure you have a plan to follow and communicate. Now let's talk about budget. And I don't mean just like the size of your budget, but your strategic allocation of your budget, how you're deploying your dollars to, achieve everything you're trying to accomplish within the renovation.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily about the size of the budget. It's about how you allocate those funds, where you're spending the money. Because if I've just got a budget of, say, $50,000, well, just because I did $50,000 worth of work to this property doesn't mean I gained $50,000 in value.
Yeah.
Now, if I allocate correctly, that $50,000 could be $50,000 or it could be $75,000 in value.
And we see this misaligned expectation all the time in the real estate space because, people did do exactly what you're saying. Like, oh, we fixed up our house or we, put in a new bathroom or whatever. They've invested something into their property. And to them, that equates as like, we spent $50,000 on this project. And it doesn't always translate to a value add from a buyer, when you go to actually resell the property. And so people want more money than a buyer's willing to pay. And it's a classic example of like, you're just throwing money into it, throwing money at the wall, and there's no strategy. So how are you actually measuring the return of your investment?
Okay, so let's talk about what are the high value or high impact places where you may want to really strategically allocate more of your funds, like layout corrections, kitchens, the function of kitchens or bathroom layouts, lighting, things like that.
High use, highly livable sections are important. Yeah. But if you're making, a lot of decisions apart from that function aspect of like livability, you're putting yourself at risk for allocating funds to something maybe that you really like that isn't really value add to the asset. So that, if you do position yourself to sell, like other people, it may not make sense. Like, oh, you did this, outstanding wallpaper in this room and it's not really my color or my taste or whatever. And you overspent on your fund allocation here because you loved the aesthetic of it. And it doesn't really add a lot of value from an asset perspective versus, to your point, those high impact areas like your kitchen, how people are actually functioning in the space, who it's designed for, or your bathroom. Do you have adequate storage that people are going to want? Is there a his and hers sink? All of those things are what ultimately move the needle from a valuation perspective. And
okay. But then there's also the areas where it kind of has a little bit more of a lower end or lower return value. And this is where sometimes a lot of people can really overspend in the budget by not truly paying attention to what you're adding and is it going to give me that return on my design?
Yeah.
Like things like custom millwork, while it's gorgeous, it's, can be beautiful and when done right, adds a tremendous amount of value. But if you're putting it everywhere, are you overspending and not getting that value back?
Good question. So make sure you're not ignoring the importance of exactly how your budget number or your budget for your project is being deployed. And don't just turn it all over to a general contractor and say, run with it. You need to have a plan of how the money is going in and is that value going to be expected on the backside.
Yeah.
So that you're not redoing a renovation 2 years after you just did one. Okay, so let's go back to those like high impact areas and focus on infrastructure. So another big point of a renovation is, it's really closely aligned with flow and function, in my opinion, but I'd love to hear your insight about infrastructure specifically around those high impact spaces.
Yeah, I think the flow and function, like usability, like if a walkway seems too narrow, we've got to correct that so that it's actually usable. Otherwise, you're just creating a new pain point or you're just leaving one checked. And it's going to matter to a potential buyer or renter or, however you're choosing, or even if it's your own personal home, it's going to matter to you in the end. It's still going to create a pain point for you.
Yeah. We're actually dealing with a situation right now in a project we're doing where we have custom cabinet fabrication, and there's a 90-degree, corner in the kitchen. And we've been having conversations about the design and making sure that that infrastructure, if you will, is not going to cause a new problem. Like we have a drawer function, and making sure we have the proper clearance, and like all these little details of evaluation are the strategy level that we're talking about, of really making sure we're focused on these high impact areas that create real value, and the livability aspect, that functionality. We don't want to put this incredible custom kitchen together and then have mechanical problems when they're trying to actually live in the space.
Yeah, and actually trying to use it. I mean, nobody wants a set of drawers you can't open because it's hitting the next set.
Yeah.
Because, you didn't think, or it wasn't fully laid out to the best of its ability.
Yeah. And on the same note, there's another situation. I know people like to hear stories, so I'm trying to paint a picture for our listeners here, but in a bathroom, yes, we're thinking about storage, as should you be, but it's high impact from a usability standpoint too. So you need to think about electrical, like, do I have the right plugs in here for function? We have been recently correcting a bathroom for a project we're working, and they had issues with the plugs. Yeah. They had purchased a house, the plugs didn't make sense. They don't even know what they're used for. And so those are the type of high impact areas that you really want to focus on and make sure you are accounting for. And we're not just solely focused on aesthetics.
Yeah. Aesthetics are nice, but form and function will win you, for lack of a better term, more points in the end.
Well, let's just hone in a little bit more on these high impact areas, because this is where people get it wrong a lot. And honestly, a lot of these flaws in execution are because they didn't define it early on in the scope of work and really in the design. I mean, when you just start, tearing down walls and trying to execute based off of a final image versus like a real plan, you're missing out on major infrastructure like HVAC location. Like we've already pointed to electrical things that easily get glossed over. What are some more examples that you could think of? Like you said, hallways, the width of hallways, wall alignments. When you're looking at traffic flow, you don't want, like we're doing a remodel and we've transformed an old utility closet into a pantry. And so we're realigning the traffic flow from the kitchen into the pantry. So wall alignment is important there.
We actually removed part of a wall so that it creates an open flow and concept and doesn't close off.
Yeah. But these are the type of infrastructure examples we're talking about. Like, yes, we can create a plan on paper all day long, and we should be. But then when we go into execute, you need to be really paying attention to these details as well in your plan, so that you're not getting that unexpected scope increase and overlooking some really important things that are going to affect the design and the renovation. And last but not least, the order of operation.
This one's big.
Yes. And how you're going about actually executing. So tell us about that.
And when you start having to rework something that you've already done, you're compounding costs, you're compounding frustrations, you're compounding time. If you're laying down tile before you've moved a wall that you needed to move, well, now you're looking at tearing out tile that you just paid for material, time, and labor. Now the time to move the wall and then redo it all and still have to make sure it all lines up as it was supposed to originally.
Yeah. And making sure those trade participants are coming in on the right rhythm. Like, let's talk about a relocation of a washer dryer that we recently did, and the tradespeople that were involved, and the process of execution. Like, we couldn't call in this guy until this guy did what needed to do.
Yeah, so with that, we were moving the washer and dryer unit from the original utility room into what we're redesigning as a new area. Well, we had to first, before I can move them, I've got to get the plumbing over there. Okay, well, the plumber gets in there and he's got to create his new drains and, run the water lines. I've also got to get the electrician in there. Okay, I need to get those guys in because they actually have to open the wall up before I get my painter in there.
And your drywall.
And my drywall guy. Because
And our flooring.
if I put the drywall up, well, my plumber and my electrician are going to go cut it up so that they can run what they need to do. And then I'm going to pay my drywall guy again to
And
come fix it
millwork
again.
too for your baseboards. And so the order of operations crucial.
It's very crucial. And you can move through areas and take it to a point where hey, I've still got to touch this piece. But we're going to hold up. We're not going to get all of this laid up to here. We're going to hold back here, and that allows us to kind of get some things ready and then pivot to the next section so that we can tie everything in seamlessly.
Well, and that is a great talking point because that is real life, right? Like when people are living in the property that they're actually renovating, which happens a lot. That is not ideal, but it's real life. So how do you coordinate that order of operations so that it is something that can actually be done? You can actually live in the space and remodel it at the same time or do it for a client.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's kind of the way I think back to being in my corporate career, like structurally and the order of what needs to happen and how you can move through a project or project area. Because what you do is you basically break the whole house down into multiple projects and you order out each project or each scope of each section of the project.
Yeah. And not even just the house into different scopes, but the actual
also, the different trades and what needs to be done. And I may have the plumber in here this week doing this work, and I'm gonna have him back in 2 weeks to do this over here because I've got to move strategically back and forth across.
Yeah. So just to give you an even greater image of what that looks like, we have worked on a project where we basically split the house in half and we did a full finish on one half and then allowed them to live in this half. So wait, let me back up. So they had to move out of that half for us to execute that half. Then we fully executed that half. Now they're living in that half while we're executing the remainder. So that whole order of operations, how you're approaching it, how you're actually executing. So if you can get these 5 decisions right and really assess each renovation project with all of these things included, you're going to have, a better impact on your renovation execution. You're going to control your costs better and not have that regret, that execution regret of, oh, I did this and now I hate it, or I didn't think of this and I need to fix it. And overall, just better livability and better valuation for that asset, that actual investment you're making, which in turn is a part of the return that you should be getting on the design.
And remember, you don't have to renovate everything, but you need to prioritize and prioritize correctly, because the success of your project is structural more than it is aesthetic.
Okay, so if this episode has clarified for you what actually matters, what you really need to be considering, make sure you follow us. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, connect with us on our website and our social platforms at Real Return on Design. And on our website, we actually have our blueprint that we've created. It's a return on design blueprint, and this helps position you to accelerate this process, to help diagnose your space so that you can start evaluating the function. You can start developing a real scope and start figuring out how to allocate funds and actually have success and peace while you do it. Find it on our website, audaciousdesigns.design, under Return on Design Blueprint. And thanks for listening today. We hope that it is valuable to you and it has you thinking in a new way of how you can actually be successful.
And if you like what you heard today, remember to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, keep up with us. Send us comments about your projects or questions you may have. We'd love to get into those and help you out along the way.
Thanks for joining.